Section 39 of Villette by Charlotte Bronte. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Leanne Fortune. Section 39. Miss Fanshawe, with her usual ripeness of judgment, pronounced Dr. Bretton a serious, impassioned man, too grave and too impressible. Not in such light did I ever see him. No such faults could I lay to his charge. His natural attitude was not the meditative, nor his natural mood the sentimental. Impressionable he was as dimpling water, but, almost as water, unimpressible. The breeze, the sun moved him. Metal could not grave, nor fire brand. Dr. John could think, and think well, but he was rather a man of action than of thought. He could feel, and feel vividly in his way, but his heart had no chord for enthusiasm. To bright, soft, sweet influences his eyes and lips gave bright, soft, sweet welcome, beautiful to see as dyes of rose and silver, pearl and purple, imbuing summer clouds. For what belonged to storm, what was wild and intense, dangerous, sudden, and flaming, he had no sympathy, and held with it no communion. When I took time and regained inclination to glance at him, it amused and enlightened me to discover that he was watching that sinister and sovereign Vashti, not with wonder, nor worship, nor yet dismay, but simply with intense curiosity. Her agony did not pain him. Her wild moan, worse than a shriek, did not much move him. Her fury revolted him somewhat, but not to the point of horror. Cool young Britain! The pale cliffs of his own England do not look down on the tides of the Channel more calmly than he watched the Pythian inspiration of that night. Looking at his face, I longed to know his exact opinions, and at last I put a question tending to elicit them. At the sound of my voice he awoke as if out of a dream, for he had been thinking, and very intently thinking, his own thoughts after his own manner. How did he like Vashti, I wished to know. Was the first scarce articulate but expressive answer, and then such a strange smile went wandering round his lips, a smile so critical, so almost callous. I suppose that for natures of that order his sympathies were callous. In a few terse phrases he told me his opinion of, and feeling towards the actress. He judged her as a woman, not an artist. It was a branding judgment. That night was already marked in my book of life, not with white, but with a deep red cross. But I had not done with it yet, and other memoranda were destined to be set down in characters of tint indelible. Towards midnight, when the deepening tragedy blackened to the death scene, and all held their breath, and even Graham bit his under lip, and knit his brow, and sat still and struck, when the whole theatre was hushed, when the vision of all eyes centred in one point, when all ears listened towards one quarter, nothing being seen but the white form sunk on a seat, quivering in conflict with her last, her worst hated, her visibly conquering foe, nothing heard but her throes, her gaspings, breathing yet of mutiny, panting still defiance, when, as it seemed, an inordinate will, convulsing a perishing mortal frame, bent it to battle with doom and death, fought every inch of ground, sold every drop of blood, resisted to the latest the rape of every faculty, would see, would hear, would breathe, would live, up to, within, well nigh, beyond, the moment when death says to all sense and all being, thus far and no farther. Thus far and no farther. Just then a stir, pregnant with omen, rustled behind the scenes. Feet ran, voices spoke. What was it? Demanded the whole house. A flame, a smell of smoke replied. Fire! Rang through the gallery. Fire! Was repeated, re-echoed, yelled forth, and then, and faster than pen can set it down, came panic, rushing, crushing, a blind, selfish, cruel chaos. And Dr. John? Reader, I see him yet, with his look of comely courage and cordial calm. Lucy will sit still, I know, said he, glancing down at me with the same serene goodness, the same repose of firmness that I have seen in him when sitting at his side amid the secure peace of his mother's hearth. Yes, thus adjured, I think I would have sat still, under a rocking crag, but indeed to sit still in actual circumstances was my instinct, and at the price of my very life I would not have moved to give him trouble, thwart his will, or make demands on his attention. We were in the stalls, and for a few minutes there was a most terrible, ruthless pressure about us. How terrified are the women, said he. But if the men were not almost equally so, order might be maintained. This is a sorry scene. I see 50 selfish brutes at this moment, each of whom, if I were near, I could conscientiously knock down. I see some women braver than some men. There is one yonder. Good God! While Graham was speaking, a young girl, who had been very quietly and steadily clinging to a gentleman before us, was suddenly struck from her protector's arms by a big butcherly intruder, and hurled under the feet of the crowd. Scarce 2 seconds lasted her disappearance. Graham rushed forwards. He and the gentleman, a powerful man though grey-haired, united their strength to thrust back the throng. Her head and long hair fell back over his shoulder. She seemed unconscious. "Trust her with me. I am a medical man," said Dr. John. "If you have no lady with you, be it so," was the answer. "Hold her, and I will force a passage. We must get her to the air." "I have a lady," said Graham, "but she will be neither hindrance nor encumbrance." He summoned me with his eye. We were separated. Resolute, however, to rejoin him, I penetrated the living barrier, creeping under where I could not get between or over. "Fasten on me and don't leave go," he said, and I obeyed him. Our pioneer proved strong and adroit. He opened the dense mass like a wedge. With patience and toil he at last bored through the flesh and blood rock, so solid, hot, and suffocating, and brought us to the fresh, freezing night. "You are an Englishman?" said he, turning shortly on Dr. Bretton when we got into the street. "An Englishman, and I speak to a countryman," was the reply. "Right. Be good enough to stand here 2 minutes, whilst I find my carriage." "Papa, I'm not hurt," said a girlish voice. "Am I with Papa?" "You are with a friend, and your father is close at hand." "Tell him I am not hurt, except just in my shoulder. Oh, my shoulder! They trod just here." "Dislocation, perhaps," muttered the doctor. "Let us hope there is no worse injury done. Lucy, lend a hand 1 instant." And I assisted while he made some arrangement of drapery and position for the ease of his suffering burden. She suppressed a moan, and lay in his arms quietly and patiently. "She is very light," said Graham, "like a child." And he asked in my ear, "Is she a child, Lucy? Did you notice her age?" "I am not a child. I am a person of 17, responded the patient, demurely and with dignity. Then directly after, "Tell Papa to come. I get anxious." The carriage drove up. Her father relieved Graham, but in the exchange from one bearer to another she was hurt, and moaned again. "My darling," said the father, tenderly, Then turning to Graham, "You said, sir, you are a medical man?" "I am. Dr. Bretton, of La Terrasse." "Good. Will you step into my carriage?" "My own carriage is here. I will seek it, and accompany you." "Be pleased then to follow us," and he named his address, the Hotel Crécy, in the Rue Crécy. We followed. The carriage drove fast. Myself and Graham were silent. This seemed like an adventure. Some little time being lost in seeking our own equipage, we reached the hotel perhaps about 10 minutes after these strangers. It was an hotel in the foreign sense, a collection of dwelling houses, not an inn, a vast, lofty pile, with a huge arch to its street door, leading through a vaulted covered way into a square all built round. We alighted, passed up a wide, handsome public staircase, and stopped at numero 2 on the second landing, the first floor comprising the abode of I know not what Prince Russ, as Graham informed me. On ringing the bell at a second great door, we were admitted to a suite of very handsome apartments. Announced by a servant in livery, we entered a drawing-room whose hearth glowed with an English fire, and whose walls gleamed with foreign mirrors. Near the hearth appeared a little group, a slight form sunk in a deep arm-chair, one or two women busy about it, the iron-grey gentleman anxiously looking on. "Where is Harriet? I wish Harriet would come to me," said the girlish voice, faintly. "Where is Mrs. Hurst?" demanded the gentleman impatiently and somewhat sternly of the man-servant who had admitted us. "I'm sorry to say she has gone out of town, sir. My young lady gave her leave till to-morrow." "Yes, I did. She has gone to see her sister. I said she might go. I remember now," interposed the young lady. "But I am so sorry, for Manon and Louison cannot understand a word I say, and they hurt me without meaning to do so." Dr. John and the gentleman now interchanged greetings, and while they passed a few minutes in consultation, I approached the easy-chair, and seeing what the faint and sinking girl wished to have done, I did it for her. I was still occupied in the arrangement when Graham drew near. He was no less skilled in surgery than medicine, and on examination found that no further advice than his own was necessary to the treatment of the present case. He ordered her to be carried to her chamber, and whispered to me, "Go with the women, Lucy. They seem but dull. You can at least direct their movements, and thus spare her some pain. She must be touched very tenderly." The chamber was a room shadowy with pale blue hangings, vaporous with curtainings and veilings of muslin. The bed seemed to me like snowdrift and mist, spotless, soft, and gauzy. Making the women stand apart, I undressed their mistress, without their well-meaning but clumsy aid. I was not in a sufficiently collected mood to note with separate distinctness every detail of the attire I removed, but I received a general impression of refinement, delicacy, and perfect personal cultivation, which, in a period of afterthought, offered in my reflections a singular contrast to notes retained of Miss Ginevra Fanshawe's appointments. The girl was herself a small, delicate creature, but made like a model. As I folded back her plentiful yet fine hair, so shining and soft, and so exquisitely tended, I had under my observation a young, pale, weary, but high-bred face. The brow was smooth and clear, the eyebrows were distinct but soft, and melting to a mere trace at the temples. The eyes were a rich gift of nature, fine and full, large, deep, seeming to hold dominion over the slighter subordinate features, capable probably of much significance at another hour and under other circumstances than the present, but now languid and suffering. Her skin was perfectly fair, the neck and hands veined finely like the petals of a flower. A thin glazing of the ice of pride polished this delicate exterior, and her lip wore a curl, I doubt not inherent and unconscious, but which, if I had seen it first, with the accompaniments of health and state, would have struck me as unwarranted, and proving in the little lady a quite mistaken view of life and her own consequence. Her demeanour under the doctor's hands at first excited a smile. It was not puerile, rather, on the whole, patient and firm, but yet once or twice she addressed him with suddenness and sharpness, saying that he hurt her, and must contrive to give her less pain. I saw her large eyes, too, settle on his face, like the solemn eyes of some pretty wondering child. I know not whether Graham felt this examination. If he did, he was cautious not to check or discomfort it by any retaliatory look. I think he performed his work with extreme care and gentleness, sparing her what pain he could, and she acknowledged as much, when he had done, by the words, "Thank you, doctor," and "Good night," very gratefully pronounced as she uttered them. However, it was with a repetition of the serious, direct gaze, I thought, peculiar in its gravity and intentness. The injuries, it seems, were not dangerous, an assurance which her father received with a smile that almost made one his friend, it was so glad and gratified. He now expressed his obligations to Graham with as much earnestness as was befitting an Englishman addressing one who has served him, but is yet a stranger. He also begged him to call the next day. "Papa," said a voice from the veiled couch, "thank the lady, too. Is she there?" I opened the curtain with a smile, and looked in at her. She lay now at comparative ease. She looked pretty, though pale. Her face was delicately designed, and if at first sight it appeared proud, I believe custom might prove it to be soft. "I thank the lady very sincerely," said her father. "I fancy she has been very good to my child. I think we scarcely dare tell Mrs. Hurst, who has been her substitute and done her work. She will feel at once ashamed and jealous." And thus, in the most friendly spirit, parting greetings were interchanged, and refreshment having been hospitably offered, but by us, as it was late, refused, we withdrew from the Hotel Crécy. On our way back we repassed the theatre. All was silence and darkness. The roaring, rushing crowd all vanished and gone. The damps, as well as the incipient fire, extinct and forgotten. Next morning's papers explained that it was but some loose drapery on which a spark had fallen, and which had blazed up and been quenched in a moment. End of section 39. Recording by Leanne Fortune.